Hey guys, Languagehacker here. MT5, also known as Masters Tour Castle Nathria, happened this weekend, and I wanted to highlight some of the cool decks that people brought that may not have been as prevalent on ladder before this weekend. So let's hop in and talk about some of these decks. Before this weekend, Big Spell Mage wasn't really on people's radars. And Big Spell Mage is a spell that is a deck that existed before Castle Nathria, that ran Rune of the Archmage and Drakefire Amulet as big spells, and then ways to either cheat it out with Barbaric Sorceress or Belinda, armor gain, drawing it with Evoker, and repeating it with Grey Sage Parrot, and kind of abusing those big spells. But it kind of fell off after Nathria came out because of the addition of Volatile Skeletons. And Skeleton Mage became a bit more popular. So people didn't mess around with this too much, but a day or two before the MT, the Masters Tour, this deck started popping up again with some new cards included. And this is actually Bunny Hopper's 40 card list. The Big Spell Mage, I think, on HS Replay is a 30 card list, which is more popular. But I wanted to highlight this because I think Bunny Hopper was one of the only players in top like 32 or 40 or whatever it was who brought big Spell Mage, 40 card Spell Mage. The main cards that are really included now are Nightcloak Sanctums, some early game plays with Sketchy Stranger that gives you some flexibility with secrets. I don't think the normal 30 card list runs this, so that's worth noting as well. So Suspicious Alchemists, the restriction of not being able to run other spells in your deck because you want the expensive card package, so that Evoker doesn't draw expensive stuff, and so that Belinda doesn't draw the wrong spells. This gives you some flexibility. It's a Discover spell. It's also one mana minion, which is good in aggressive meta because it helps you fight for board. So it accomplishes quite a few things in that sense. Prince Renathal, which isn't exactly new because it came out a little bit before. Theotar for some disruption. And the rest of the deck looks pretty much similar, right? We're running the Double Reckless, Bran. We have the Mordresh, Dawngrasp package, so that's a win condition as well. And the Big Spell Mage package. And I thought this was just a really nice, interesting list. I think X Bly's also in last call ended up submitting an XL Big Spell Mage, but that was before Castle Nathria, if I'm not mistaken. So the new cards hadn't been out yet. So Bunny Hopper's take on this list was kind of interesting, and I wanted to go and highlight it. I should have mentioned this at the start of the stream. All the players that I pulled these lists from will be linked/credited in the description below. Their Twitter should be there, and the deck codes for these will also be in the description if you guys are interested. So, Bunny Hopper's XL Spell Mage. Next up, Wire submitted Druid. Oh, wow, Druid. It's so wacky. But it is kind of wacky. So let's go over and see what this list is. It's not an alignment list. It's a big Spell Druid, which is kind of interesting. I fiddled with something at the start of the expansion, but I couldn't flesh it out properly. But it looks like Wire did kind of get the right sort of makeup, because Wire also went 6-2 in the Masters Tour, which is a very good score, which means that he won on multiple occasions with his Druid deck. So similar sort of purpose, right? You run some expensive spells that you can cheat out with either Nightshade Bud, which is a new card, 8 mana spell, choose one, discover a minion from your deck to summon, or a spell to cast. So if you have a very select amount of spells, when you pick spell from this, you can just discover the one that's good for the situation. And that's either Convoke, Miracle Growth, Scale, and probably by that point you're not going to be using Nourish or Innervate, and hopefully you've drawn at least one of them to make it more consistent with the Nightshade Bud. There are Barbaric Sorcerers as well. Because of the expensive cards, it's easy for Druid to ramp up, especially with some added Widow Bloom Seedsmans. Wild Growth was cut from this deck to make the other big spell stuff more consistent, so you can have some disruption with the Barbaric Sorceresses, discounting your boxes and whatnot, your other cards. Even if you don't discount box, like Sorceress on, like, let's say Seedsman on 4, Sorceress on 6 mana, and then you can just play whatever spell got discounted for tempo. Couple of big stuff because you want to ramp to the good stuff. Some anti-aggro tools here with Panther, Druid of the Reef, Theotar, which we're going to see in a lot of decks now. Mailbox Dancers, similarly to the Big Spell Mage, gives you coins to ramp up to your big turns, and it can give your opponents coins that you can swap with the Barbaric Sorceress. What else is worth noting here? Green Thumb Gardener, not a card we've seen too much. This isn't new in this expansion. It was experimented with a little bit in Voyage or Journey to the Sunken City, but it makes sense in this deck, right? Because you're running very expensive spells, so you can do a lot of crazy stuff when you get a lot of mana. And of course, Guff, because, you know, Guff is the right stuff. Yeah, so this is a nice greedy, but also slightly disruptive sort of deck, which I'm curious how this deck kind of panned out for him. I should go check stats on that. But he did well with it in any way. I might try this on ladder myself. It looks kind of fun. Anyways, Wires, XL, Druid. Lambie Series. So Lambie Series actually didn't compete in the Masters Tour, but a day or two before, I think either he tweeted or someone else tweeted that they found a like a nice little rogue list, and I think credit goes to Lambie, but don't quote me on that, which is why I call it Lambie Series. It's a sort of, so it's similar to a rogue video I posted I don't know, a couple weeks ago. That's right at the start of the expansion that has the same sort of idea where you do Sinstone Graveyard stuff, make some big things, and then you just hit your opponent in the head. So it's a tempo/aggressive deck. However, I was running, not Skeletons, I was running Vessels. And Vessels actually ended up being really annoying because for two reasons. One, it stops Edwin's sort of draw chain, and it makes the average card in your deck a bit more expensive. So you have slightly more awkward early turns if you don't hit prep with the Vessel or you discount it with the Cutlass. So the Vessel was kind of nice. And another reason for running Vessel was because I had Mr. Smite in the deck. Now, Mr. Smite causes a couple of issues. One, same thing, Edwin chain stops. And two, it makes your Shroud of Concealment less consistent in two ways. One, it doesn't draw your Knolls. And two, it draws a neutral card, which doesn't discount the Knolls. And you really, really want Wild Paw Knolls as your mana in this deck because it's all about making huge tempo turns, revolving around when your Sinstone Graveyard is active. So when you have a bunch of 0 mana Knolls, you have Shadow Steps to Shadow Step them, prep out other spells, Serrated Bone Spike for discounts as well, this new card. You get really, really big idiots, and then it turns out that when you have big idiots and you hit your opponent in the head and you have some burst as well, your opponent's kind of die. And there's a couple of ways to make big idiots. You can either make the big idiot ghosts, so you can make the big idiot weapon. I don't know why I'm calling it big idiot, it's just a term. You can make a big weapon with Draca, and you can just make a big Edwin. So you have multiple big things you can make that kind of win the game. And late game, you still have some burst. The Wicked Stabs update, you can discover some stuff off of Tooth of Nefarian. Scabs is a nice board reset, and it helps you get through taunts. And of course, Krakatoa, because Krakatoa is busted. I think some people even tried cutting like Crab or Scabs and then putting like a second Fillet Fighter, which is something you could do if you want to be a bit more combo-oriented and don't want to have expensive things stopping your chains. Regardless, the deck performs really well against some of the meta decks, namely, I think Warlock, Hunter, and Imp Warlock. I think both iterations of Hunter and Wig Priest, which is quite prominent in the Masters Tour. So because of that, I think it was a good idea to bring it to the Masters Tour. I'm not sure if it'll be as good of a deck on ladder because it's not particularly great into Shaman or Druid, but I mean, it's not unwinnable. So take it for a spin. It's pretty cool. Check it out. I actually don't know where this list came from initially. If someone knows, feel free to drop a comment. But it's Imp Warlock with a few changes. I decided to... I didn't decide. There were a couple of lists, but this is the one I settled on. So I don't like Bloodbound Imps. They just felt really bad, and stats-wise, they just were also quite bad, so I didn't like those. This is actually the list I brought to the Masters Tour, but I was inspired because I saw some other people playing this the few days before the Masters Tour. You add Murloculas, Lifesteal, infuse 4, this costs 0. Kel'Thas Sinstrider, and Sidon. And this helps a couple of matchups because decks that are good at controlling your board, mainly Skeleton Mages is the main one I was trying to focus on taking against with this deck. They can stop you from hitting them in the head eventually with freezes and Nightcloak Sanctums, board control with Deathborn and whatnot. And having a bit of burn is nice with the Nathrius. It also heals you, so even if they don't control your board, but they try racing you, you have a way to heal back up. Now, it's not incredibly consistent because having a specific 3-card combo is not that easy, but with Impending Catastrophe draws, you get to it pretty quickly, or you just, if you don't have the Impending Catastrophe plus these guys, you just hit them in the head with the normal Imp Block stuff. You can still kill people very aggressively here. And Tamsin as well for some extra card draw. This also helps some other matchups too, technically, but mainly I wanted to take against Mage. So this has a bit more top end. Gigafin as well helps against any deck that makes a board, really. But specifically Wig Priest, Gigafin is here for that, because if Wig Priest starts doing stuff, it's kind of yucky, and this is a nice little board reset against Wig Priest, which they won't necessarily be able to deal with very easily. They basically need a Samuro to get through this, or they can silence, but if they silence, then they lose their board anyways, so you're kind of happy. So having a nice little win condition against, an extra win condition against Wig Priest I found was really nice. I think people had some various lists similar to this. I think some people did not run. So I have Grimoires of Sacrifice here, which helps the mirror. It helps against Wig Priest to some extent. It helps against Mage as well, because you can go, and this actually won me several games. You can go Murlocula, Grimoire, kill their board of skeletons that they made off of Deathborn or whatever. Then you go Kael'thas Sire. Everything goes face because you clear the board. It's really cool. You have to be careful that you don't die to the skeleton death rattles. But that actually won me like 2 or 3 different games having that specific combo. I mean, it doesn't have to be Murlocula, just something cheap that you can Grimoire. But Grimoires actually felt really, really nice, especially when you summon a bunch of imps from various effects. So yeah, try this out. I had fun with it as well, and I think it performed relatively well in the tournament. I think several people, 6-2 or higher, had a list like this in their imp blocks. So, those are the 4 interesting decks I wanted to point out from the Masters Tour. Everything else is kind of boring, just normal Shaman Druid stuff. Imp block, Skeleton Mage, not that fancy. But these ones are pretty cool. So try these out. Deck lists are below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you guys have fun.